Tibet. And can we stand by and just look on? 6,246 monasteries and temples robbed and ruined and destroyed, a fifth of the whole population murdered, 130,000 forced into exile, and about 3,000 fleeing every year across the mountains over passes of 6,000 meters, a civilization and a culture deliberately devastated by an occupying atheist autocracy, continuing enforcing violent oppression to this day. Now 58 years of colonization by brute force, destruction, brainwash, propaganda, and enforced materialism and atheism. The Chinese communist regime is kowtowed to by all the business world for its economy, while therefore politicians also crawl to that most dreadful rotten empire of lies, an outward face all smiles, an inward face all cruelty, deceit, and power greed. It started off Pol Pot manipulating him to run the Holocaust regime of poor Cambodia. It gave to Pakistan its nuclear potency and served both sides of Nepal's civil war with weapons. It is maintaining Burma's military inhumanity, of drug monopolies, of heroin and total tyranny, and what else? The ruins of Tibet, if anything, cry out forever against cruelty and atheism as the ideology of the most corrupt communist regime in history of China. Marriage, why not? I always tried to stick to the platonic form of love as the most rational, reliable, and relevant, especially in our age of planet-risking overpopulation. Quarrels was my horror always, and in matrimony they can never be avoided. I was once deceived and quite determined never to become deceived again, and I was never willing to end up a hero under any slipper. You can have as free and independent any number of good friends of any gender, but as married one relationship must dominate all others, which was never in accordance with my democratic freedom soul. The final argument that as a free man you can love the more is maybe though the most decisive, vital, and determining my fate. Stuck in love. What's better and what's worse? The nightmare of uncertainty, of the force of jealousy? When the communication lines don't work and you are left like on a desert island in a void, the nightmares of uncertainty and jealousy pursuing you and haunting you and hunting you to death each night, not knowing what your love is doing in whose arms, while all that you can do yourself is wallowing in self-torment, like in the straitjacket of cruelty of destiny, much worse than any hospitalization. Your sole comfort is that you still love her, and will go on doing so no matter what she does, since no one can get out of that heart she has entered. Thank God for feminism. Just don't let it put you down, that squeamish, scrupulous meticulousness appertaining to the oversensitivity of female delicacy, leading to the pettiest of pedantry. Forget all that and look to beauty. Disregard the coarse uncouthness of the masculine barbarity, and let it be replaced by all the virtues of true femininity, the modesty and delicacy of consideration, and the touch of suaveness in the magic of the sieve of lovable romanticism, that alone makes life endurable by that unique spice of eternity called love. Forget the sexes and the genders. Love is all that matters, constantly transcending every limit and surpassing all in life that is affected by that petty and ignoble menace called mortality. Nepal. There is no one braver or more stalwart and intrepid than a Sherpa or a Gurkha, sticking to the end in faithfulness, agility and bravery, a mountain people with incredible potentials and one of the poorest countries in the world, torn asunder by a fatal civil war of 10 long years because of foreign powers intervening, arming terrorists and anarchists with weapons to be able to impose dictatorship themselves. But Nepal is and always was the freest of all Asian nations, which the British wisely did respect and therefore never colonized, but left it wild to only take into their service individuals, unconquerable Gurkhas and invaluable Sherpas, best of mountain fighters, first to climb Mount Everest, fantastic representatives of this so hearty people, hot and hard, but nice and friendly, and, like every mountain people, warmer, more reliable and loyal in their hearts, as if they were more human in the hardship of their mountain wisdom than all plain and ordinary human beings. Love simplicity. When the cold attacks you savagely with deep freeze, let your love get warm and warm you up. When dampness and humidity strikes deep with roughness in your limbs, let sunshine love with comfort dry you up. When darkness looms, assailing you increasingly and overwhelmingly in winter days, let love loose in your soul to light you up. When your love is away on distant journeys and adventures, and you never know if you at all will see her yet again, let her in spirit in your dreams appear. Just think of her and she will never leave you, and thus will your love continue to remain with you in constant dreams as long as you just keep on loving. Another love definition. Love is dying without dying, an eternal pain of pure delight, a torment utterly enjoyable forever, and a mortal fall into an endlessness of darkness, into the abysmal death of life, reborn to start again from the beginning, this delightful craze of sadomasochism, which hurts the more for its endurance, and the deeper, harder, and more painful for its spirituality, sincerity, and honesty. The greatest lover was Othello for his jealousy. No Romeo, no Tristan knew love better than the Moor, who knew it was worth dying for it and was quite consistent in so doing. So do never cry, complain, or treat love negatively, but endure it and enjoy it for its sufferings. For it is certainly the greatest privilege in life that man was offered for his bold decision to at all take up this haphazard existence, to endure and suffer for it with his love. The anti-modernist. Is it wrong to be a realist? Is clarity to be condemned, since you are not allowed to be outspoken, as if direct honesty was something negative, while shadowy and fishy innuendos were preferable? Is downright classicism condemnable then, and no more allowed? What is poetry and verbal art if not free license for expressive sumptuousness and loose imaginative speculation? If you give it then some comprehensible and realistic form, and use some relevant correct syntax and grammar, so that it approaches something of a style, is that then to despise, denounce, and scrap, since it is not in line with Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot, James Joyce and Samuel Beckett? What's wrong with an obnoxious anti-modernist is that he is so shockingly as so upsetting radical in the completely wrong direction, since he breaks with fashion tendencies and ruling nonsense, and rejects the dissolution of all forms and language, heading strong against the stream by being clear-cut and demanding realism and comprehensibility, And is it then so damnably completely wrong? Impressions of India, this fascinating continent, more populous than Europe, is still dominated by the oldest of the world's religions, quite unbrokenly since 3 millennia at least, making her the oldest intact culture in our world, enriching it in the historic process with one world religion more, the high morale, integrity and wisdom of the common sense philosophy of Buddhism, while at times disturbed by more intolerant intruders like the Muslims and the Christians, doing what they could to devastate the history, the culture and traditions of the ancient heathen India, which instead absorbed them to enrich her culture with them, adding constantly more faiths, more languages and cultures, more philosophies and outlooks on the world and life, thus constantly remaining basically tolerant and universal, which repeatedly her history has proved. In modern times there has been a considerable renaissance of Hinduism, heralded by Romain Rolland, who introduced in Europe Ramakrishna with his followers Vivekananda and Rabindranath Tagore. The latter gave a universal voice to Hindu tolerance and wisdom, cordially embracing every faith and heralding a world community and unity, like in a university of common faiths and knowledge, cultures, shared philosophies and mutual creativeness. Not only Kipling, Talbot Mundy, MMK, John Masters and Jim Corbett, first to introduce national parks of wildlife, owed their lives to India, but Mahatma Gandhi was an Indian too, accomplishing political reforms and miracles by obstinate non-violence. One of his pupils was the Japanese monk Nichidatsu Fuji, rebelling against society, career and martial life by sticking to a beggar's life and making it his mission to erect peace stupas all around the world, especially in India, as a demonstration against nuclear weapons, having seen Hiroshima and Nagasaki, making it his goal to have all nuclear weapons in the world dismantled. He was active to the end, 100 years old when he passed away, some 20 years ago, but his peace stupas go on rising everywhere, in Africa, in South America, in London, India, and all over Asia, crying out the urgent message universally, "Peace, please." Dharamsala, blessed haven of Tibetan refugees, they come to you through snows and hardships, across icy passes of 6,000 meters, shot at in the process by insentient China soldiers, as if the oppression in Tibet was not enough, but escapees must even have to run the gauntlet across the austerity of the forbidding Himalayas to, in Dharamsala, finally find freedom and a human treatment with full dignity as ordinary, faithful, human and compassionate Tibetans. During the horrific Holocaust against the Jews, they still in concentration death camps found the means to make the best of a bad bargain, stay alive, survive the Nazis, and in places even make rebellion, like in Sobibor, Treblinka and the Warsaw Ghetto, and in later days look back with some nostalgic tenderness to those horrific challenge days, remember the communities and even love that strange existence of extreme conditions. In the same way, the Tibetans face the challenge, make the best of it, and never give up faith or spirit, certain that one day again Tibet will be set free, while nothing can redeem the Chinese occupation force from facing the severest accusations of the facts of history. Meanwhile, the thriving paradise of Dharamsala keeps on working hard with meditation and enlightenment and spreading worldwide the immortal message of the sacredness of freedom, truth, integrity, and wisdom, spiting all the mortal rotten lies of all autocracies in history. Kashmir, war-torn paradise of inexpressible beauty, with the friendliest people in the world, embracing any stranger with their love and overwhelmingly presenting to them this fairy tale of beauty and reality, of magic lakes of endless peace and mountains towering around them to enshrine the loveliest realm of India, torn asunder by politics, civil war, and meaningless atrocities since 60 years, with countless innocents as victims, like in any war resulting from politics, that established ignorance called power only causing miserable havoc by the irresponsibility of humankind. But beauty, paradise, and peace survives, is always born anew and never tires, and shines through the most romantic landscape of the blessed mountains of Kashmir, the land of overwhelming beauty, which eventually will conquer and prevail, since there was never any human heart that was not moved by truth when it was beautiful. The inescapability of love. I love you, but I don't need you, but I need to love you, which is a more potent urge than nature, which not even nature can inhibit, sabotage, postpone, or hinder, which is why we have no choice but keep on loving constantly forever, making the best out of it, and overcoming obstacles and spite all destinies, defy the mundane horror world, and just keep on in faithfulness, sincerity, devotion, and profundity, to just go on expanding and enlarging the forever growing depth and truth of love. Wounded. You cannot get more hurt in wars, in accidents, or in disasters than in love. When disappointment is but followed by more disappointments, when the wounds are only opened deeper, and when nothing can be healed, for punctured soul cannot be bandaged, and all is only worsened time and time again in something like a constant hellish repetition, which gets on, gets worse, more cruel and more unjust, then enters the banal, ridiculous situation that your love is changed to hate, and thus the irreparable self-torment only worsens in its utter pain. And still you hesitate to make the operation, to just end it all, disrupt and close up the relationship, to kill your feelings and seal up that chamber in your soul, since still the memories are there of how it started in its glorious beauty, only to be crushed by a reality which always was infallibly insensitive and ruthless in its cursed sordidness, which in its unawareness, murderous insensitivity, is worse and crueler than death. Sårad. Mer sårad kan man inte bli i krig, i olyckor, i katastrofer än i kärlek. När besvikelsen blott följs av fler besvikelser, när såren bara borras djupare, när ingenting kan helas, ty punkterad själ kan aldrig plåstras om, och allting blott förvärras om och om igen i ett slags ständigt mer helvetisk tjatighet, som bara håller på, blir värre, grymmare och mera orättvis. Då uppstår den banala, löjliga situationen att ens kärlek byts till hat, och så blir det ohyggliga plågeriet bara ännu värre och mer smärtsamt. Ändå drar man sig från den kirurgiska operationen att helt enkelt göra slut, förtränga relationen, döda känslorna och stänga detta själsrum, då dock minnena finns kvar av hur det var då allting började så innerligt, gudomligt vackert. bara för att krossas av en verklighet som alltid var fullkomligt okänslig och hänsynslös i sin fördömda krasshet, som i sin omedvetenhets okänslighet är grymmare än döden. The pain of life. When pain invades and kills the soul, so let it kill, but let it not desist, but go on killing with its pain, so that it can be felt most thoroughly, and so that you can feel the more that you are still alive and can survive the pain of having your soul killed. Thus you can also go on loving, although love is dead and murdered, since it goes on hurting, and so hard, so outrageously and intolerably hard, so that you almost feel the more alive, for it's so hurting so outrageously. So cut no bones on me by amputation, master barber surgeon, for all my gangrene, and transplant not my heart, although it is so broken, but let me live on as long as it just hurts enough, so that I yet may feel to still be living all the way until I die. Livssmärtan. När smärtan dödar själen, låt den döda, men låt den ej upphöra, men fortsätt att döda med sin smärta, så att smärtan känns ordentligt, så att man ändå får känna att man lever och kan överleva smärtan av att ha en dödad själ. Så kan man även fortsätta att älska, fastän kärleken är död och mördad, då den alltjämt gör så ont, så alldeles förbannat ont, så att man nästan blir som än mer levande just för att det gör så förbannat ont. Så amputera inga ben på mig, herr Fältskär, trots min kallbrand, och transplantera inget hjärta, fast det gamla har gått sönder. Låt mig leva vidare så länge det gör ont, så att jag dock får känna att jag lever ända tills jag dör. The gutter misery. We ignore it, trying not to mind, and look the other way if it insistently protests too hard, which only makes it worse. The homeless with his shaky alcoholic stench, the withered prostitute inviting anyone for just a few poor pennies and still gets no customers, the beggar tart with her small crying child in rags, who no one wants to offer anything, since no one feels responsible for her situation, and the child with swollen belly and infected eyes, too large and suffering to even raise compassion, since the misery is too revolting in its ugliness. The leper demonstrating his horrendous mutilations to get money, and the cripple crawling without legs, and twisted limbs on some invalid cart on small wheels, and the thousands who no more can rise, have given up as lost and scrapped, with no more strength, just waiting to get carried out and thrown away. That's our reality in major parts of our world, which we don't want to see or care for, since we have enough of ourselves, which claims all our attention, blinding us to that reality, which in the end will never spare us. Rännstenseländet. Vi förtränger det och låtsas inte om det och ser bort åt annat håll om påträngandet blir för insisterande, varvid det bara växer och blir värre. Uteliggaren med skakig alkisstank och skäggstubb, den bedagade prostituerade som säljer sig för några pennies men ändå blir utan kunder, tiggerskan med barn på armen som är någon vill ge något, då är någon känns vid något ansvar för situationen. Barnet med uppsvällda magen och de stora ögonen, för stora och för uppsvällda för att ens väcka medlidande, då misären är för ful, grotesk, frånstötande och avskyvärd. Den spetelske som demonstrerar sina stympningar för att få pengar, krymplingen som krälar utan ben och armar på en småhjulskärra, och de arma tusentals som aldrig mera orkar resa på sig ens, som givit upp, förlorade och skrotade och väntar på att forslas bort. Detta är vår verklighet i större delen av vår värld, som vi är gitt där sed och vi har alldeles tillräckligt av oss själva att bekymra oss med intill fullständig upptagenhet och blindhet för en verklighet som dock i längden aldrig skonar oss. Bitter tears, you killed it all from the beginning without giving it a chance when you deceived me with that wimp who did already have a wife when I found you in bed with him while you ignored my birthday and defended him, your lover, against me as if I was the real presumptuous, outrageous intruder. How could such a shipwreck ever set to sea again? Your other lovers, after his incompetence, were equal failures, each rebelling naturally against your blind lack of empathy and total egocentrism. Is all your beauty just a mask, then, and a luring substitute for your inadequateness, immaturity, your childish limitation to yourself, and lack of any spiritual antennae? No one could have hurt me deeper than you did, since I gave you my love in full, while all you wanted was to toy with sissies, whom you could entirely control and dominate. My only comfort in this mess of an aborted possibility of a sincerity, of love expected at its best, turned out its worst, is that at least I made it in not hurting you. Love's bitter abyss, the well of all your tears of love, can never get filled up and never emptied. It will always be enriched by new laments, while all the old ones never can be cancelled or forgotten, keeping that abyss forever constant, without bottom, without end, and flowing always without ever overflowing, never satisfying, never measurable, always black in darkness and annoying you by always, when you look down into it, presenting you with that most hateful mirror of your own deluded face, as if all that well so full of sorrows actually contained was only your own self. But real love is the opposite. Forget yourself, transcend yourself, get out of it and think of someone else, and independent of how many loves you lost and failed you, there will always still be someone left who has deserved your love. Your love, you are the only sun of your life, and only you can make it shine, to give it warmth and tenderness and love. You have no right to crave it from the others, and if you feel sorted out and forlornly cold-shouldered, those cold shoulders are your own, and only you yourself have closed your heart. There is no other world in you but your own heart. The universe is yours if you would open it, your heart, to others, but the flow is always yours, depending only upon you. That is responsibility. If you can take responsibility and give it, then there's nothing wrong with you. And all you have to do is keep on loving tirelessly, going out and actively forever. Din kärlek. Du är den enda solen i ditt liv och bara du kan bringa den att skina för att ge det värme, ömhet, kärlek. Du har ingen rätt att kräva det av andra, och om du upplever dig som mobbad, utesluten, är det du som själv har uteslutit dig och bara du har själv stängt till ditt hjärta. Du har ingen annan egen värld än i ditt hjärta, och allt universum tillhör dig om du kan öppna det för andra, men dess energi och kraft är bara din, beroende av bara dig. Det är ditt ansvar. Om du kan ta ansvar och ge över det, så är det inget fel på dig. Och allt vad du behöver göra är att bara fortsätta att älska outtröttligt, aktivt, utåtgående för alltid. Bleeding hearts, they are more common than you think, the silent bleeding aching hearts of loneliness, too proud to give away their pain by crying, and the more their aching vibrates universally, resounding in the ether of spiritual sensitivity, where they indeed can never be alone, since those who cry in silence without tears, in constant inward drowning in their misery, are that part of the iceberg of all human grief that never can be seen but goes the deeper. We who know their grief can share it, in deep sympathy, in silence and respect, and cry and pray with them in humble service at that altar of all tears of blood that never became known. Blödande hjärtan, det är vanligare än du tror, det är hjärtan som i tystnad blöder i sin verk och ensamhet, för stolta för att visa djupet av sin smärta med att gråta. Men blott desto mer ger verken resonans i universum, i den spirituella känslighetens eter, där det sannerligen aldrig är i fred och ensamhet. Då det som gråter tyst inom sig utan tårar, under ständig drunkning i sin sorgs elände, är den del av mänsklighetens sorgeisberg som ej någonsin är synlig men går desto djupare. Vi som är initierade i denna sorg kan dela den i djupt deltagande och innerligt respektfull sympati, för att tyst be och gråta med dem i en altartjänst vid alla de blodstårar som ej någonsin blev kända. Ladakh, safe haven of an earthly paradise, untouched by devastating holocausts that left all Tibet and Kashmir in ruins by political atrocities and civil wars, you stayed up in the clouds, untouchable by earthly powers, in your prayers, monasteries and traditions, intact and unbroken since 1,000 years. And thus you keep on flourishing in cozy comfort, isolated 8 months every year, by severest winters closing up all passes, to let you in peace run festivals all winter, in your harmony and happiness that seems incurable. And yet you are in some ways leader of the world in reasonable ecological economy, for you must, since you are always short of water, but which system of cooperation admirably highly developed to make life in hard conditions possible at all, the whole world needs to learn a lot of. Thrive in peace and arduous hard work, and teach the world about your harmony and virtue, blessed mountain kingdom far away beyond the landscapes of the moon. Love never passes except to remain. Was love then just a passing dream, a perfume of seduction, like a cloud dispersed by any wind, a fragment of a dream to never be remembered, a terrible delusion without reason? But the dream was there and lingers still, and cannot be forgotten or denied, and will continue haunting you as long as you remain alive, since any love, and even the most brief, is true, and nothing can recant it or control it. Love once given will remain with you forever, as a lasting remedy, reward, or nightmare, as you wish, and only you yourself can give it any character. The trial, all those dreadful morning moods. Do I need you? Only positively, since I do not need your problems, your ingratitude and worries, all those morning quarrels, when we both denuded stand stark naked with our souls in constant trial of our lives, our tragedies, mistakes and crimes, our rotten morals and illusions, which are an infinity of dreadfulness, disorganized disorder, an entangled mess of weird confusions, and unsorted heaps of odds and ends, just like in any marriage, although we were never married. Shall we let each other go then, just to try to set us free? Is that possible? That is the real question and the trial that can never reach a verdict. Purity of heart and love is all that counts in love and all that makes up love. There is no love where opportunity turns up and fools you into calculation, which immediately corrupts it and turns it away to other forms except sincerity, integrity and honesty, and thus it even may turn into hate, the very opposite of love, which always is one-sided, true and living only by its honesty. If love is true, it's better to abstain from it and banish it forever than risk having it defouled by anything unworthy of its highest level, if it once has been attained. Natural truth. Truth will always out, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Like a force of nature, it is mercilessly irresistible and absolutely neutral in its callousness, no matter what objections humans might find justified, no matter how dishonourable it could be to ladies, presidents or priests. The nature of the truth is such that nothing can suppress it, and if someone tries, it only will boil over, though more certainly and fatally. The only danger of the truth, in fact, is actually to try to hold it back, like whipping a wild bolting horse, which only the more certainly will throw you off. So naturally it is wiser to pay heed to inconvenient truths, and listen to them carefully and even search for them, than to pretend that they are false or don't exist. However, there is one way to assuage the truth, and that is simply just to make the best of it. Accept it, bear with it, and carry on. For instance, if you find your ship abandoned, just sail on without the captain until he returns, and if he doesn't, just sail on, as long as there is any sea to sail on and a boat to save you from it. Bitterness. After tears and rains, the sun will shine anyway and go on shining always, even when clouded. Anything is better than bitterness. If all you can do is but quarrel, then just get lost and forget it. Leave it behind, close that wardrobe. Get down to reality instead and stop worrying, crying and moaning, which never will do any good, but only as a waste of time. Go on and leave the yesterdays behind you, and you will find that all that is ahead of you is just a glorious lot of splendid tomorrows. Sikkim, paradise of dreams, perhaps the last of Shangri-Las. Your pastoral idyllic peace is like a life elixir and a fountain of perpetual love, with your abundance of lush gardens, with the greatest richness in the world of orchids, making actually your entire country like a secret, wonderful botanic garden, in the vastness of which anyone gets lost to never reach the end of it. In these dark winter times, it gives immense relief and comfort just to think of your warm paradise, with maybe the most gentle people of all India, indeed a fountain of perpetual youth and of sweet lasting dreams, to always have in store and to return to with fond tenderness and everlasting pleasure. Goa. They say you find the best of Indians there and all the worst of Westerners. Is that because of all those parties going on forever, day and night, the whole year round, and reaching something of a climax around New Year's celebrations? This was actually one of the first established hippie paradises of the 70s, together with Nepal and Bali. All those hippie colonies migrating as the seasons changed, in summer for Nepal, in winter down to Goa, and escaping the monsoons to Bali, and this circulation still goes on. The party never ends, but only changes places, moving even up to Kashmir and Ladakh, occasionally when the Nepal Civil War made things uncomfortable there. So welcome to enjoy and join the party. There is now 3 generations of those hippies, still incorrigible as peace and rainbow activists all round the globe and constantly increasing, gaining ground as gradually the world begins to realize that they were always right from the beginning, sacrificing world affairs, careers and vanity for the idealism of living more for love and beauty as the only means to make a future possible. The secret lover. I don't care who steals you from your friends and truest lovers. I don't care who kisses you and fondles you. Your opportunism is your own affair and no concern of mine. And neither is your scheming calculation and ingratitude. We are poor devils living idealistically and are therefore free to use whatever means fate offers us for opportunities. My distant silence shall the more be eloquent and echo universally the obviousness of my unhappy love, for no one loves more honestly than those who suffer for it. Let my ague then be evidence enough that I alone was your supreme and only perfect lover, who expressed it best by suffering in silence. At a loss, the morning after before the day of tomorrow, I lost my head in sudden gusts of crises, blowing in with climate changes, bursting every sense of credibility and probability, stability and safety, replacing it with bursts of chaos in which all you can do is to cool it down, get drunk, resign, and just forget about the global mess in which the world has lost its head and cannot find it anymore. What shall we do about it? There is only one thing certain about life, and that is that we all must die, and then we'll see what happens. That, in fact, is maybe our lasting hope, that there is always some surprises left. Vägen vidare. Vi har samma väg att gå, men den bär bara utför och den tar aldrig slut, ty den börjar där den slutar och den slutar redan där den börjar. Men det är ett slut som aldrig tar slut. Det är en väg att gå tillsammans mot en undergång som aldrig kommer och under vars gång vi aldrig kan förenas, fast det är resans enda mening och det enda skälet till att vi gör den. Någon av oss måste falla på vägen men blir sedan bara bättre sällskap, så som andlig beledsagare och reskamrat som aldrig mera släpper taget. Så reser vi i evighet mot undergång, mot en början som aldrig kommer och ett slut som aldrig tar slut, men som alltid fortsätter och börjar om på nytt, just när man tror att allting tagit slut. Journeying on, we are together on the same road, which, however, only leads to hell and never ends, for it begins where it's the end and ends already from the start, but that end is an end that never ends. It is a way to go together towards a perdition that will never come, and during which we never can be joined, although that was the only reason why we made it. Someone has to fall during the way, but only to become the better company, as spiritual leader and companion who will never more desert you. Thus we journey on forever to perdition, towards a beginning that will never come, and an end that never will be terminal, but always will go on and start again from the beginning, just as you thought that everything was finished. Santa at bay, tomten på dekis. What do you expect of me? To humor you for a Christmas corrupted and commercialized to death? To drive around with my reindeers in a world without snow, where you have ruined the whole climate with your pollution? To be happy and laugh that silly old ho, ho, ho in all your din, of deafening noise shouting down all that sounded good, and accept that you have turned Christmas into a prostitution of all that was lovely and nice about the holidays by your bloody vulgar shit publicity and commercials, which only has debased me into the greatest fool of universal ridicule during the last 50 years. To keep a shining jolly face amidst all your warring, when your society only is good for burning people out, when Christmas trees hardly can grow any more in your acid forests, where you have cut down almost every single wild tree, and when you just ignore all your hospitalized victims buried alive and dying while you just eat yourselves to vomit, imagining you have a good time while all you produce is diarrheas. No. The only proper thing about Christmas nowadays is the liquor and the wine, that at least you have that good sense to drink yourselves unconscious in all your mad failures. And don't expect any Christmas presents from me this year, or any other year. Don't expect to see me any more, for I'll be on strike this Christmas and forever, just sitting at home drinking. Old flames, you love them still and can't forget them, but you never look them up, bored as you are with sleazy memories, and so instead your conscience aches, and you feel sultry and desultory, although there's nothing wrong and you were not at fault. The difficulty is to start again, get out of all your failures and get on with it. But burnt as you so miserable are, you really do not feel much for it, sticking to those awkward, sticky memories that you don't feel like looking up, and for that reason even less can get away from. It's the old predicament of old sentimentality, and all you actually can do about it is to wallow in those memories and write some poems to assort them. I can't stop loving you. How can I love you without hurting you and causing harm to our relationship? We only seem to be quite safe when we are gone at proper distance from each other, but that constant separation is the deepest wound each time you leave me for another, for your life of flair and casual pleasure that excludes all intimate relationships and makes a lasting friendship difficult, debarring it from ever reaching any fathoms of profundity. Yet another temporary separation and divorce, prolonging it and making it yet more unbearable and unsurveyable, is that how our love is doomed? To ever grow but never reach fulfillment? I am at a loss, bewildered and bedazzled, and am only sure of one thing, that I can't stop loving you. My friend or foe, I do not know you and therefore cannot trust you. Something tells me you will be my death some day. Your love I cannot doubt, it certainly does turn me on, and I am grateful for your company, since you are always there, my most mysterious travelling companion, and your beauty certainly is irresistible, and yet I hesitate, which you must bear with. You can never be too careful about love. It is the easiest way to get burnt out, and still you cannot do without it, but must have it, like a drug of unknown consequences. You are certainly the most dramatic of my friends, but also the most dangerous. So please forbear with my precautions. I will love you, certainly, with all my flesh and soul. It's just my heart and brain I'm uncertain of, but they will follow, though not without warnings. The humanist's dilemma. The problem about humanism, although an ideal, is that it must needs have neutrality. It is objective goodness that must cancel passion, to subsist, survive, exist at all and thrive, and therefore almost all the greatest humanists were all without relationships. They stood alone except for neutral friends. Is humanism then a philosophy that must deny the freedom of relationships? Not quite. But humanism is also practical, demanding freedom most of all, of mind, of conscience, and of thought. With one relationship then dominating in your life, the humanist is at the mercy of an octopus that always tends to bind and slow you down. I love relationships, invite them and adore them, but please let me keep them neutral, and I can only entertain and maintain them if my back is free and I may keep my freedom to have all the world and cosmos for my friends. Sweet obsession. Are we obsessed or just possessed? And what with if not with each other? But it is a sweet obsession and a loveliest possession, for as long as we may keep it, and it seems to be for quite some time, since it is hardly possible to see an end on it. It is perhaps a blessedness to take well care of and enjoy as one of life's most golden moments, which apparently may last for quite some time, since so far we have failed to end it, although we have bravely tried indeed. So maybe after all it is worth holding on to, since it's so reluctant to leave us in peace. Unutterable love. We speak in silence, in communion with the stars, our most attentive listeners, who understand our thoughts, the secret language of our souls, which only intimacy has access to, with a key of safe discretion, more infallible to ever be invaded. And so our love is intact as the best kept of all secrets, which curiosity will try in vain to importune and only find the black hole of our mystery. Let's keep it that way and continue to expand in our love forever. An ordinary love poem. Our love seems only to increase with the years, as if instead of growing older we grew younger, as if old souls never could grow older, but only younger in mentality, vitality and quality, as if maturity was something ever to increase with age in juvenility, ability and vivacity, like an old mentality growing ever younger in strength and power with acquired wisdom, the bitterness of experience carrying only sweetest fruits. And thus our love, in spite of all full stops, the divorces, differences and disasters, only is revitalized each time we meet again in a miraculous metamorphosis of a phoenix, never learning from mistakes but ever starting right again, as if time, age, experience and generations matter less or not at all than only a brief moment of our union, in 1 second outdoing all eternity. Artisten. Strunta i publiken, det är inte den som gör din dikt, och om de läser den så är det deras ensak och inte något som du ska bry dig om, ty lever den så lever den, och det är allt som betyder något. Vad den innehåller är en annan sak, det är sekundärt, så strunta i dess innehåll och var ej rädd för att förolämpa publiken. Den tål vad som helst, liksom du tål vad som helst, om du bara håller dig till sanningen, alltså din egen subjektiva sanning, ty det är den som är din integritet. Ingenting annat spelar någon roll, så var ej rädd för ens att stoppa undan din dikt längst ner och underst i byrålådan för att glömmas där och aldrig få någon läsare. Lever den så lever den, och då kommer den fram ändå, förr eller senare, då något en gång skapat alltid lever sitt eget liv och följer sina egna lagar som du inte kan göra något åt om det bara lever. Det är skapandets privilegium och helvete att alltid bli av med allt vad man gör. The artist. Ignore your audience and your readers. They are not the ones who write your poetry, and it's only their own business if they read it. Nothing that should cause you any worries, since the only thing that matters is that what you're writing is alive. Its contents is another secondary matter. If it is alive, it will remain alive, and that is all that should be of concern to you. So do not be afraid of being inconvenient or provocative or even controversial and insulting. Just forget about all possible reactions and that you at all might have an audience. They will stand whatever and survive, and always be there and return, for good or worse, regardless in what mood. And if you are ignored or lynched, it's of no consequence to what you write, which should be written and stay written for the life and honesty you gave it. It should even be of no concern of yours if all you write ends up in silence in the bottom drawer, to stay hidden there, concealed from every reader, never to be read or noticed. If there is true life in it, it will appear in its own right, sooner or later, in the limelight of attention, since what has once been created and endowed with life will follow its own laws, and fate, which is beyond you and all your control, if only it has true life of its own. That is the privilege and hell of the creative power. You have no control of it once you have let it out. Love understatement. Hiding my love in poetry was my best means to protect it from indiscretion and importunism, and thus have I kept it safe for you, intact and entire in glorious purity, for its safeguarded expansion infinitely, and yet I don't know where you are, perhaps not even who you are. Since my knowledge of you ever was imperfect, in awkwardness and shortcomings, since I never knew what you expected of me. Perhaps it was nothing or merely friendship, but I ever gave you more and wanted more and wished so much more to offer you, but you were never there in physical accessibility, since you were only soul and the more overwhelming spiritually for your absence of approachability. Once Beethoven said that in woman the body has no soul and the soul no body, and yet he loved the more for never reaching his beloved. But I have always reached you and kept yourself within me, and will do so continuously forever. Close encounters of the 4th degree. The unforgettable encounter left me marked forever, with a stamp burnt in from which I never will recover, like a most incurable disease in which you waste forever without dying in a torment that will never cease, but merely increase, unnoticeably worsening so slowly that it's stealing on you from behind, so furtively and fatally as never to leave you in peace from that mere knowledge that from now on you'll be dying like a leper, slowly, inconceivably, to never let you die completely, and that is the worst of all in this unending doom. And yet your face, that should have been so utterly familiar, was so alien and so fascinating in its unreality, that I could but be stuck with it forever, studying it too thoroughly for its so creeping horror, worse than any monster or wild raging animal, and so appalling in its utter naked truth, a soul unclothed and bared in all its magic, not to ever let me free again from that tremendous spell, affecting all my life, reducing me to nothing but a thrall, to fear and obstinate workaholism for maybe more than just a lifetime sentence. Still, I do not know you, and it was my own fault that I dared to look you in your face under the influence of that most devastating drug of truth, effacing all reality except the basic spiritual one, so fatally revealed to me in just one catastrophic look into a mirror, to immediately kill me off to save my soul, but slain in bondage in the chains of servitude forever. Unwelcome guests at Poet Bay. We are all strangers here, as fleeting as the ghosts of shadows, visiting and staying on in vain, in spite of being most unwelcome and abandoned, to just vanish without any trace, with only memories to keep our ghosts alive, like improvising temporary guests who think they make great presents and by all means make the best of it, to vanish all the same, completely, like untombed Elizabethans. Very well, it's just to be accepted, but there's nothing to prevent us from maintaining golden memories and cultivating them in peace forever. They can close down any sight and burn all poetry, but they can never stop us from continuing to visit parties uninvited just to make our poetry. Ovälkomna gäster i poeter.se. Vi är alla bara gäster här, så flyktiga som skuggors spöken på besök och dröjer fåfängt kvar, trots ovälkomst och övergivenhet för att försvinna utan något spår, med bara minnen kvar att hålla våra andar levande, som tillfälliga improvisatoriska besökare som tror sig vara något och som gör sig till så gott de kan för att ändå försvinna fullständigt som lik i tomma gravar. Det är blott att acceptera, men ej någonting kan hindra oss från att bevara gyllene minnen och odla dem i fred för alltid. Det kan slopa hemsidan och låta all dess poesi förgås, men det kan aldrig stoppa oss ifrån att fortsätta att gå på fester oinbjudna bara för att producera poesi. Palestrina. Palestrina made some music which was far too beautiful to suit His Holiness the Pope, who thought the music dangerous in its seducing beauty, luridly diverting people's minds from their religious formalism and order to a better world of spiritual harmonies, which in the long run could outdo religion as something better and a more spiritual alternative. So the Almighty Pope called forth the Inquisition to investigate the magic of that lewd musician, which they did and found that his polyphony was insubstantial like the clouds. So Palestrina was allowed to go on making music of his own invention, which is quite ingenious still today, and matchless as perfected polyphonal choir singing, much more to the glory of that God who had been so misunderstood by that almighty church, which thought it fit to make the Inquisition try some music. Palestrina komponerade musik som var för vacker enligt påvens öron, då den var förförisk i sin skönhet och riskerade att vända folks uppmärksamhet ifrån den religiösa formalismens ordning till en bättre värld av andlighet och harmoni, som i längden kunde slå ut religionen som ett bättre och mer spirituellt alternativ. Så påven konsulterade inkvisitionen och bad den undersöka den riskabla musikern och hans förföriskt sinnliga magi, vilket de gjorde och kom fram till att hans polyfoni var lika grundlöst svävande som molnen. Så den gode Palestrina fick fortsätta skapa sin musik, som fortfarande idag är helt genialisk och oöverträffad i sin polyfona perfektion, så mycket lämpligare såsom hyllning till den Gud som kyrkan missförstått så grundligt att den kallat på inkvisitionen till hjälp för att förstå musik. Orlando di Lasso, the merry fish of virtuosity, unchallenged as a virtuoso, last of the great Flemish music masters, learned his music nonetheless in Italy, and where, if not in Naples? He toured vigorously all of Western Europe, but preferred the northern Italy, although his fixed position was in Munich, on the wrong side of the Alps. In contrary to Palestrina, who heroically challenged his misfortunes when he lost his children and his wife already in advanced age in the plague, remarried and refused to be let down, Orlando de Lassus, successful always, with 2,000 compositions on his conscience, was in latter days seized with melancholy, and found it difficult to get out of that bog, as if his whole triumphant life of just encores had merely been a mirage of some self-deception. Curiously enough, they both died in the same year, Palestrina quite unbroken by his tragedies, Orlando Lasso at a loss for all his unbroken successes. The war of madness on sensibility, Benazir Bhutto in memoriam. This cannot pass unnoticed. It is too blatant in preposterous absurdity. It is too over-obvious and can never be defended. Mrs. Bhutto wanted peace and sense to rule in Pakistan and therefore was assassinated by a suicide bomber. Can it get more sick? The state of fundamentalists and terrorists, the fanatism of psychopathic paranoia, waging holy war against a woman just because she was a woman of some influence, a blind attack on all the values of civilization, justice, reason, sense, constructivism and education, only to enforce dictatorship, intolerance, and backward brainwash unto death at any cost. And this was not the first time. The same brute force was launched in Burma against peaceful demonstrants who only asked for what was reasonable, also led by one courageous and heroic woman who has been imprisoned for some 16 years. In China, this war of insanity against good sense, against all human rights, against suppressed Tibetans, and against the perils of philosophy and Buddhist wisdom has been going on for 60 years and still not tires in its efforts to exterminate the freedom of the human mind and thought and conscience and the life and culture and the history of the Tibetan nation. They will never tire, all those mad dogs of barbarity, in their efforts to annihilate all sense and beauty that excels their own, and they will never learn, the miserable bastards, that they never will be able to succeed. Vanvettets krig mot förnuftet. Det kan ej passera obemärkt. Det är för skriande i sin absurda överdrift. Det är för övertydligt och förblir för alltid oförsvarligt. Hon reste hem till Pakistan för att få fred, demokrati och sunt förnuft i landet och blev därför mördad av en självmordsbombare. Kan det bli mera sjukt, ett sådant tillstånd av förtvivlad fundamentalism och terrorism, en psykopatisk paranoias fanatism som krigar mot en kvinna bara för att hon är inflytelserik som sådan, en blind attack mot alla civilisationens värden, rättvisa, förnuft, konstruktivism och utbildning, och blott för att forcera etablerad diktaturs intolerans med hjärntvätts bakåtsträvande till döds till vilket pris som helst. Och detta var ej första gången. Samma blint brutala maktspråk fördes nyligen i Burma emot fridens demonstranter som blott bad om självklarheter, också ledd av en modig och heroisk kvinna som har hållits fängslad nu i mer än 16 år. I Kina har det galna kriget mot förnuftet, mot mänskliga rättigheter, mot förtryckta tibetaner och mot faran av buddhistiskt sunt förnuft och dess filosofi nu förts i 60 år och fortsätter med syndens envishet att föra kampen krampaktigt mot samvetsfrihet, tankefrihet och yttrandefrihet och emot all tibetansk identitet, historia och kultur. Det tycks aldrig tröttna, alla dessa galna hundar av okunnighet, i sina fåfänga försök att krossa allt förnuft och skönhet som begår det brottet att det överstiger deras egen. Och det lär sig aldrig, dessa miserabla uslingar, att det ej någonsin kan lyckas. Death is down. Death is never death, but just an aimless threat, in vain to challenge life and give it some adversity, just to forward progress and transgress resistance, to bring life the more to victory, eliminating destructivity forever, which is only there as spice and salt to make the stew less boring. Death is only what makes life, surviving, overcoming, conquering, and glorying in eternity like phoenix. So don't for a moment think that Poet Bay is finished. It has only started. Monteverdi, Orpheus, and their lost wives. Claudio worked for years on that incredible experiment, the opera, the very first one, celebrating now 4 centuries, but working too hard on it, his poor wife got lost and died, and Monteverdi never could get over it. His opera was the supreme success. It started avalanches of successes. But just as Orpheus failed in getting back his wife, so Monteverdi lost his wife forever. He resigned and moved to Venice to commence a different career as church musician in St. Mark's, and was successful all his life as such, for 30 years encore, but never, and not even in his finest music, managed to retrieve the unjust theft of his beloved wife from death, the falsest thief of all, who never can get punished and never will return a stolen life. Gesualdo and his wife. Carlo Gesualdo, Duke and Prince of Venosa, married his first wife Maria d'Avalos in 1566. His second wife, not mentioned here, survived him. He loved her truly and indeed, but far too much, so when he was deceived by the most beautiful Maria d'Avalos, a princess and twice widow, 25 years and a cousin, and surprised her in his own bed with her lover, he lost all control and massacred the couple, most atrociously, revealing greater passion than Othello, and a jealousy more horrifying being justified. The law could never get at him, since many helpers were involved, and people thought in general that he was right, that the adulterous couple had themselves to blame for openly inviting Satan to their own black wedding. But his life was ruined, and he never could forgive himself, but led an isolated life like in a prison of self-torture, caught in the horrific trap of his own tragedy, which led him to compose the most extraneous music of that century, transforming his despair, depression, grief, and tears into the most expressive madrigals that still today appear as bold and modern, in their heartrending, characteristic, constant pain, a lasting cry of love from hell. Alessandro Stradella, 1645 to 82, discovered in Rome by the Swedish exiled Queen Christina, who established his fame as musician and composer. It's not easy to be over-talented, especially not as a musician, which Stradella was, the handsome Alessandro, who had lovers everywhere and never got enough of them. The only problem was they oftentimes were married, and their husbands didn't like him to hang on their wives. So they, with some good reason, tried to kill him, just to settle matters with him once for all. So he was constantly compelled to run away, was chased away from Venice by professional and hired killers, and also from Torino, to find some security in Genoa, where, nonetheless, he found new lovers and eventually was killed by one of their infuriated husbands. He was only 37. After 7 operas and 7 oratorios and a lot of other compositions, the most talented musician of his age, killed for his extraordinary talents as a lover. Persecuted by war, Heinrich Schütz, 1585 to 1672, married for only 6 years, 2 daughters, all died during the 30 Years' War Holocaust, and only 1 small granddaughter survived of his family. His wife and daughters died, not able to withstand the press of war that kept on executing his musicians and make music almost quite impossible in dins of 30 years of war. He kept escaping from his base in Dresden, like for 100 years much later, the most tragic of war central stages, leaving colleagues, friends, musicians and his family behind from pure necessity, to keep supporting them and make his living, travelling around at random to find peace for vocal music in the churches that were left alone by war, for instance Copenhagen. And when finally the 30 years of war were over, and his friends and colleagues, church musicians, all his family except 1 single daughter's daughter, all were dead and gone and buried in the ruins of the war-torn Germany, he still kept on composing, working to the end, until at last, at 87 years, he found his peace, by reaching up to introduce the greatest age of music, having proved that it was better and more able to survive than any war politics, vanity and madness, all made null and void by the sheer beauty of the harmony of music. Hippie love. We used to love one another, and it was never wrong, no matter how much we shared our love with others and never kept it for ourselves. Our love was never a deceit, the less so the more it encompassed others, and sleeping together was never love enough. We needed more than that, and therefore always gave more than that, sharing our love universally with whomever. How can love then be confined within the restrictions of marriage, of sticking to one person, of vows and oaths and promises that never could be kept? Forgive me, my love, but I could never stick to you alone, but we owed our love to everyone. The innocents. We just refused to be part of it, the generation of the world wars, those who fought them enthusiastically, those who defended the bombs of terror balance, those who thought Hiroshima and Nagasaki were justified, those who liked the Nazis until they fell, and then the communists until they fell, those who adopted materialism and sold their lives to the slavery of mammon, and raised rigid families adapting squarely to lives of stale cubicularism, in a society of perfect capitalist consumerist order. We wanted none of all that soul pollution, but wanted freedom and the right of love, to triumph over every kind of bondage, and thus preferred beauty to the ugliness of modern man, life in nature to the sterility of urban society, and love to hate and war and freak politics. We preferred natural innocence to the guilt of modern man, which we rejected with the wars and bombs, and we were right, we are right still, and history will make us right. Unwavering light of love, The beauty of your soul transcends eternity. If you allow me this small understatement, which, however well aimed at the truth, still misses it by many light years, since you simply are unmatchable and unattainable. The love you gave me by the beauty of your grace I never will abandon or give up, but cultivate forever with affection, guard with piety and bless with passion, since it is the only life I have when you are absent. Never can our souls depart or separate from this unique love that we had and will maintain and carry on forever, like a firebrand and lighthouse in a stormy sea, to keep on shining to light up all darkness of all nights. Desert wines and roses. You come to me in flashes of delight, and I adore you like a virgin spring in an oasis in Sahara. Let us not be overwhelmed, however, by our love of endless fields of wines and roses, but let us be sensible and handle it with care. I know you are so brittle as an old Venetian glass, and I will never touch you but with velvet gloves, to only stroke you with the gentlest touch of ease. I need your love and thirst the more I miss it, but I shall never drink it to the bottom, since I know that even an oasis in Sahara might run dry if overused and used unwisely. So I'd rather thirst than risk to waste our love on anything except the holiness of our togetherness. The sweet pain of nostalgia. What matters all the pain of our memories, since we have them together, suffering together all those losses of friends lost and gone, and ever brought to mind to never be forgotten. It's the sweetness of our memories that counts in ever warmer and more beautiful nostalgia, and not the pains and pangs of heartaches, since all hurts are only there to vanish and to ever be forgotten as superfluous to life. The colours of our tender souls, forever marked by incandescent memories, will forever warm us up in the obstinacy of a constant hibernation, which will warm the more as we with pleasure share them, with a company that still remains, so long still after our explosive party, that turned on the world to keep it rolling even long after that we have gone. Soaring. All kinds of love are good and right, and there are no exceptions. Highest, though, is the affinity of souls, that has a quality of more than mortal standards, challenging the moon and stars and galaxies, since it is universal in its faculty, which nothing can bring down to earth, although you find it in all kinds of earthly forms and languages, expressions, habits and results, which all contribute to the continuity of love that never can get low or down, but is the very essence of constructiveness, one-sidedly and yet bilaterally always, since the very magic, life and way of love is always in the forward-leading dialogue. The 7 stages of love. It starts so easy and so pleasant. You start in paradise and just enjoy it, then the long way down begins. The 2nd stage is still an easy crisis, when communication fails and is replaced with gradual mistrust. Then comes the 3rd stage and the real crisis, when deceit has formed and one is made a victim, while the other enters on the path of dubiousness. The 4th stage is the melancholy limbo, when delusion is a fact and only memories remain of how delightful, wonderful and great it could have been. Then comes the 5th stage, the enforcement, when you fight refusing to give up and claim your love with any right by any means and fall in total personal defeat. Which brings you to the 6th stage, when you are forced by destiny to be a realist, admit your failure and look through all falseness, recognize that love can be abused and is misused. The seventh stage is the transcendence, when in spite of all you stay on line in love and broaden it to mature universalism, including all and laying down all selfishness, to recognize the true love of enduring quality, completely free and independent of all mortal means. Purcell and his wife. Henry Purcell, 1659 to 95, was perhaps the greatest English composer ever. They say his wife in anger locked him out and caused his death. It is not so. She had no reason to. She loved her husband. He had given her 5 children, but he was always late and overworking, and her order was not quite exemplary. When he caught that cold that autumn night and found himself locked out from home, the whole house sleeping, she had probably just acted on routine, with no intention to obstruct her husband, whom she loved and served. It was a happy marriage. There would not have been 5 children else, and Henry Purcell was, alas, a workaholic, the first genius of that kind in music, followed later by too many others, young, divine, creative artists working themselves fiercely to death before they reached their 40s, like Franz Schubert, Mozart, Mendelssohn, and far too many others. Purcell died at 36, but had produced, in only 15 years of music labour, 32 outstanding volumes of impressive music. Bach made 50, Handel 100 for comparison. So one can imagine what our Purcell would have come to as the greatest music genius of his age if he had just been home in time for bed, before his wife, unfortunately, locked the door and locked him out of contrary neglect. Masked identity. Let me keep you hanging in the air, in blind incertitude of what I am and where, for the suspension of our love, to keep it up, in view of all but beyond reach, just for the fun of it, in order that you must not lose it out of sight. For love, like any baby, needs untiring attendance, and demands more energy than anything in life, for it is life itself in its most basic flame that keeps life burning and alive and warm, which we all need who never wish to tire of remaining lovers. Vinterkräksjuka. Den är bara ett symptom på vida hemskare syndrom. Det djupa vintermörkrets fasa med dess mardrömsnätter utan tal, med trötthet som förlamar kropp och själ och gör morgonsömnigheten till en sjukdom så att det känns bättre att ej stiga upp mer. Så låt mig då få sova liksom björnen ut den hemska vintern, så att jag ej mer får vakna upp igen förrän en vårsol börjar breda ut sig över en långt vackrare och bättre värld. Ty ingen värld kan vara sämre än en skandinavisk faktisk mardrömsvinter. Vintermigrän. Finns det något jävligare? Huvudvärkens hamrande håll igång, med huvudet i skruvsted under skallande skallning, oavbrutet kräkandes och bräkandes av pinan, medan sömnlösheten vidmakthåller, uppehåller gränslösa tortyren som bara håller på och håller på och håller på. Häftigare hela tiden tills man storknar och kreverar för att längta efter att krepera. Nej, värre kan det inte bli. Alltså kan det bara bli bättre. Når man djupets botten hittar man alltid en bakväg ut, om det så måste bli genom klosetten. Till slut blir ändå allting bara skit. Vinterreumatism. Fallet är hopplöst från början. Det är kört, gosse. I 5000 år har människan kämpat med problemet, verken som väcks av vädret och flyter omkring och alltid finns där, alltid ovälkommen och oåtkomlig som den mest oinbjudna av gäster, som är den enda som alltid stannar kvar. Det enda man kan göra är att bortse från honom, ignorera honom, ägna sig åt annat, åt vad som helst som skingrar tankarna från kroppen, från verken, från helvetes plågan i köttet och benen, åt resor och umgänge och vad arbete som helst. All verksamhet är god terapi och det sämsta man kan göra är ingenting. Låt plågorna bli dig en utmaning till att lägga in en högre växel i livet, och det är den enda medicin som hjälper mot den mest obotliga av sjukdomar som är ingens fel men bara vädrets. Winter rheumatism. The case is hopeless from the start. You're done for, brother. 4,000-5,000 years men has struggled with the problem of the ache awakened by the weather and just floating, always being there, unwanted and unreachable, like the most uninvited of all guests, who is the only one to constantly remain. The only thing to do is to ignore him, disregard him, concentrate on other things, on anything that gets the focus off the body, off the pain of hell in bones and carcass, on no matter what activity, on journeys, work or social life. Whatever the activity, it is good therapy, and the worst thing to do is nothing. Let the torment be a challenge to you, to move into higher gear, and that's the only medicine that works against the most incurable of ills, which is no fault of anyone's, but only of the weather. Bullshitting bushes. Forget about those bossy bully states of bushisms spewing turd all round the world, with governing establishments for queer justification. They never led us all through history except astray, today in worse predicaments than ever, while they joke about it and pretend the situation is not real, while they know better, since they are accountable for all that mess that leaves humanity in shit, while they just profit by it. We are better off, we poets, who are free in Never Never Land, transcending no man's land, in exile from this mortal world of nonsense, into a paradise of meaningfulness, where, devoid of all corrupting power, we can see more clearly from the outside, and use common sense to stay away from all that torpid smell of vanity that comes from egoistic, short-sighted ambition, aiming nowhere but to own destruction. We are safe above it, leaving mundane idiocy to get lost with a consumer lunacy in custody of bushes. Incurably invulnerable. Since I loved you and gave you my first love, there has never been another, honestly, since you alone was ever faithful, at least in spirit, no matter who they were and what they were, how many and how dubious, all the others, all those false alternatives, all those who thought it opportune to love you less than I. My love never changed and never lost its spirit, never grew in age, but only in maturity, and it remains all yours, my love, my only love, in spite of all the efforts in the world to sabotage, obstruct, and kill our love, which was invulnerable from the start, since it existed long before we even were conceived. The teacher. When we were small, we played together, and since then our lives have grown with memories that ever grew more sweeter the longer that we kept our love prevailing, growing and expanding, like a flower that would never wither, but uniquely only just continue growing larger and more beautiful and splendid in ever-increasing sumptuousness of colours, better even than the phoenix, who gets burned sometimes to get renewed. But our love got never fire, although it kept growing ever warmer with a candour of our hearts that never seemed to mature quite enough. Since we continue learning from each other of our love, how this, the greatest miracle of all, is actually the only thing in life that can teach something about life. Within. Let me remain within you, in a love embrace that never ends, to give us life and let us stay alive, in this our love of sweetest wonders, beyond dreams and all reality, in rains of our common soul, to drown the world in love and life, to teach the universe how all this wonder works, the issue of the sharing of true love that made the first of paradises, which we never really lost, but which is there within our reach, within ourselves, and which we only can be barred from by ourselves. It all depends on us and our love, and all I wish is for it to continue, me within you and our paradise, in your embrace of ever-growing sweetness, warmth, and kindness. Vivaldi and his ladies. He was a priest and never left his first vocation, although he was forced by illness out of service. In his later years the priests complained and wondered why he never more said Mass. He hadn't then for half his life. He wrote that famous pitiful reply that illness of the lungs in all his life had made it hard for him to say the Mass at all. And when he had been interrupted by his chest pains, coughings, and so forth. Instead, he found his comfort in his music, and his orchestra of ladies was ideal company throughout his life, performing all his concerts, oratorios, and operas. Although so intimate with ladies every day, and even with most stimulating music, he remained a virgin all his life, again because of illness. It might have been tuberculosis of some kind or something like it, and like Mozart he died prematurely and was forgotten in a pauper's grave and even in Vienna. Unlike Mozart's, though, Antonio Vivaldi's graveyard is all gone, and all that now is left of him is all that virgin and enchanting music which he so enjoyed with all his ladies. Bach's poor wives. He made 20 children, and when his first wife died, from exhaustion, overstrain, and so forth, he just got another and continued making children, while she had to work at home, maintaining and supporting, cooking, serving, washing, doing everything for his immense, expanding family. And when she died, she had no pension, but was put away into an almshouse, brutally neglected and ignored by all her husband's sons and children. This domestic tragedy is easily forgotten for his merry stimulating music, which remains his better mark in history than the expressive silence of his patient wives.